Okay. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining. Running a little late, but that's okay. Let's get right into it. So, there we go. All right. This week's Torah portion, we have a double Torah portion, Bahar and Bechol Kosai, and this Parsha of Bechol Kosai is always read before Shavuos. It has the curses, the promises of what punishments Jewish people will have if they sin, and there are curses as well in the book of Deuteronomy, and those are always read before Rosh Hashanah. Okay, and I'm not going to read all the curses, but you can look it up. This is in Leviticus chapter 26. There are many verses that tell us if you do not follow the commandments, God will punish you, and they're all physical punishments. Now, in the Rabbi Shimon of Liadi, in Likutei Torah, which is the Sefer, the book that has his Maimarim, his discourses, in there he says that all these elements are actually blessings, and because they are so lofty, they cannot be revealed in a revealed way, and they have to be expressed in a negative way. And his grandson, the Tzemach Tzedek, explains that this actually, we see this in a story in the Talmud. It's a very lengthy story. I'll do my best to keep it short. Basically, the story is like this: the Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who celebrated a few days ago in Lag BaOmer, he tells us that he told his son, I should say, that he should get a blessing from two of his colleagues. These colleagues were Rabbi Yonatan ben Asmai and Rabbi Huda ben Gerim. And he said to them, my father said I should bless you. So this is what they tell him. They say to him, "May it be God's will, you should sow and not reap. You should bring in and not take out. You should take out and not bring in. That your house should be destroyed and your lodging place should be inhabited. That your table should become confused and you should not see a new year." Okay, so he comes back to his father and he says, what'd they say? He said, they didn't bless me, they cursed me. So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said to his son, tell me exactly what they said. And he repeats it. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, these are very powerful blessings. And he explained it as follows. When they said that you should sow and not reap, they meant you should bear sons and they should not die. Their statement that you should bring in and not take out means you should bring in brides for your sons and your sons should not die. Or your sons-in-law, I should say. I'm sorry. They should bring in brides for your sons and your sons should not die, which would cause their wives to leave. There you go. When they say you should take out and not bring in, they meant that you should have daughters and their husbands should not die, which would cause your daughters to return to you. When they said your house should be destroyed and your lodging place should be inhabited, this should be interpreted allegorically, as this world is compared to your lodging place, and the world to come is compared to your house, as it is written. Their inward thought is that the houses shall continue forever. The sages said, do not read it as inward thought, kirbam, rather read it as kivram, their graves. According to this reading, one's grave is considered his permanent house. The sages gave Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai son a blessing. He should dwell in his temporary house rather than a permanent home, i.e. he should live a long life. Then the next part, when they said your table should become confused, they meant you should be blessed with many sons and daughters so that there will be noise and confusion at your table. When they said you should not see a new year, they meant your wife should not die. As a result, you should not have to marry another woman, about which it says in the Torah, when a man has taken a new wife, he shall not go out to war, neither shall he be charged with any business. He shall be free at home for 1 year. So by saying he shouldn't have a new year, he shouldn't see a new year, means he shouldn't have another new wife. Okay. So, the Maharsha, who is the commentator on these types of stories in the Talmud, he says that this was a brain tease. However, in Hasidic thought, again, this idea is like this is in a cryptic way because it was from a very deep level. And we have another story. There was we know the story of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son were slandered to the government, the Roman government. They had to run for their lives, and they lived in a cave. No one knew that they were there, except the prophet Elijah would come twice a day and study with them. One day, in the study hall, this is all written in the Zohar. One day in the study hall, The rabbi said, we don't understand. How come the curses in Leviticus, which are referring to the punishments that happened in the first temple period, um, versus the curses that are in the book of Deuteronomy are the second period? In the first one, it says, in which we're going to read this Parsha this week, even with all this, when they are in the land of their enemies, I have not been abhorred by them. So in other words, there's like promise of hope. However, the curses in Deuteronomy contain no such promises. And nobody in the base measures can understand why the verses in Deuteronomy don't have any kind of hopeful ending. Rabbi Yehuda Bar Yochai then rose to his feet and saying as follows: Woe to the loss of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, whose whereabouts are unknown to anyone. Even if anyone were to know, we would not be allowed to reveal them. So they said Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is the only one who could figure this out, and he's not here. So the Zohar continues. One day, Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, got up in the morning and saw birds flying, and a dove flying behind them. He stood up and said, Dove, dove, faithful messenger, since the days of the great flood, the Jewish people are compared to you. Go and fulfill an errand to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, wherever he may be. The dove descended and came to Rabbi Yossi. He wrote a note, which the dove took into his mouth, flew to Rabbi Shimon, and flapped its wings. Rabbi Shimon, upon seeing the note, began to cry. And he said to his son, I cry because I have been separated from my colleagues, and I am crying because the correct explanation has been hidden from them. What will the later generations do? Okay, that's the beginning of the story. So now, how are they going to figure out the answers to this question? Elijah came and saw Rabbi Shimon weeping. He said, I was going to go on another mission now, but God sent me to wipe your tears. Don't, Rabbi, don't. There is no need to reveal these matters to the righteous now. But thus God said. So Elijah says to him. So Elijah says as follows. In the first set of curses, there are 32, which correspond to the paths of the Torah. And the second set, there are 53 verses corresponding to the portions of the Torah. So they, so he says, in the exile after the first temple, the Jewish people transgressed the paths hidden in secret. Their sin was revealed, and the end date of the exile was also revealed, and they were given comfort and assurance. So in other words, because they sinned in secret, it was revealed to them that exile was only going to be 70 years, and they're going to come back. So there's hope. However, in the second temple period, the Jewish people transgressed the 53 portions in a revealed way. Their sin was, so therefore God concealed their sin, and the end of the date of the exile was hidden, and they were not given the comfort and assurance. Another gust of wind came. So we got it, the difference. So the difference is that the first temple, they sinned in secret, so it's revealed to them the hope, versus in the second temple, their sin was in a revealed way, so it's not revealed to them. Then another gust of wind came and separated them, and Elijah rose to the heavens in a ball of fire. Rabbi Shimon was left crying, and he fell asleep at the opening of the cave. Elijah then returned and saying, Arise, Rabbi Shimon, from your slumber. Fortunate are you that God seeks your glory. All the promises and words of comfort to the Jewish people are written in these curses. So now Elijah says, no, there's actually, in the curses themselves, there's hope and promises. By way of analogy, a king loved his son, and despite cursing him and beating him, he loved him deeply. After his anger subsided, he had mercy on him. So too, even when God curses us, it is with love. The curses contain great goodness. Okay, so even though yes, God was angry, but then he's angry, and then after the anger subsides, and he has mercy on us. Okay, so let's say some more stories that kind of illustrate this point. One time, the Baal Shem Tov had his wagon driver. His name was Alexei, and he told him on Saturday night, you have to go to this town. And Baal Shem Tov was a regular thing by him. He had what was called Kvitza Saderech. He had this miraculous shortcut. Gets to some town. There's a poor person. He goes to his little shack, and he says, "Can I please stay in your house? Can I have a malava malka?" And he said, "Sure." He gives him that. He had some leftovers from Shabbat, and that was one last piece of bread. He gives it to his special guest. After the meal, the Baal Shem Tov stays over. The next day, he says, okay, he prayed, and he said, time for breakfast. He said, I don't have anything. So he went out, he sold whatever few belongings he had left, and he goes and he buys some food to feed the Baal Shem Tov. And this continued for many days. For a few days, this man went and sold every last thing he had. And at some point, he had nothing left. There was nothing to sell. He was at the brink of poverty. So he goes out to the forest and he thinks, maybe I'll find something here. And he cries out to God from the depths of his heart. He says, please God, let me find something. And right where he stood, he finds a hidden treasure, and this man becomes immensely wealthy. So the Baal Shem Tov told him, he said, the reason why this happened is that I saw in heaven that you were destined to become rich. However, you never asked God for wealth. You never asked. Therefore, you didn't get it. God wanted you to ask. So I had to put you in a situation that you had to ask God for help. And therefore, this negative situation that this person was in, he thought he was in a negative situation. He had no food. He couldn't even feed his special guest. But really, this was a way for him to channel something much deeper. I'll give another story. This story is recorded in the Hayom Yom this is the Hasidic calendar for the 17th day of Elul in the Parsha of Kisava. And the story goes as follows. That the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, served as the Torah reader himself. Once he was not in Liazna, that was the town where he lived, before he moved to Liadi later, for the Torah reading of Kisavo, and the Mitzvah Rebbe, which was his son and successor, was then a boy before Bar Mitzvah, heard the Torah reading from another reader. He experienced such distress upon hearing the curses in the rebuke that on Yom Kippur, the Alter Rebbe was unsure whether his son would be able to fast. So we're talking about almost a month later, or 2 or 3 weeks later, close to a month. He was so ill that his father was worried that halachically, according to Jewish law, he wasn't allowed to fast because he was an ill person. So they asked him, why did you have this reaction? After all, you hear this Torah reading every year. He replied, when my father reads it, there are no curses. So again, we see this idea that there is a real idea of there's something deep, something special, something hidden in these curses. Okay, so let's break this down into, in a way, now we said some stories, let's go back into the learning. So in Tanya, which is the magnum opus of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, we discussed before, in Tanya, there are 3 times that the Alter Rebbe discusses this idea of suffering. The first is chapter 26. And in chapter 26, what the Alter Rebbe says is, the way to get through suffering is that we should accept it with joy, because through this we will merit the Messianic era, and the struggles will be revealed as openly good. But what's the catch? The catch is you have to wait till the Messianic era. Okay, so I'll read a little bit inside. Therefore, our sages, here we go. Our sages tell us we should accept the negative with the same kind of joy we treat the revealed good. For this reason, our sages stated that the verse, those who love him shall be as the sun when it comes out in its might, referred to the reward of those who rejoice in their affliction. Therefore, if he is found worthy of seeing the sun emerging from its might in the world to come, when the sun will emerge from the sheath in which it is hidden in this world, then it will be revealed. Okay, so he's saying that the Talmud tells us eventually they will be revealed, and we'll see how it was really good the whole time. Okay, but the challenge, I should say, with that is that you're saying now it's not good, and later when Mashiach comes, we'll understand that it's good. The second time in Tanya, in the epistles, in the section of the epistles, the Igeret HaKodesh, epistle 22, the Alter Rebbe explains it slightly differently. Over there, he gives it a mashal, and we'll read it inside. The suggested advice to be able to accept with love is the counsel of the Lord in the mouth of our sages of blessed memory, to explain one's conduct. Thus, one will find within himself that require the purgation through afflictions. Then one will see clearly his great love toward himself, which upsets the natural order of the conduct, as it is with the smile of a great and awesome king, who out of his great love personally washes the filth from his only son, as it is written, when the Lord will wash the filth of the daughters of Zion with a spirit of justice. So here we see that we're saying that no, this is a cleansing process. It's a very painful process, but it's a painful process. But if we realize that this is a cleansing process, we could accept suffering with love. Okay. And that itself is, by recognizing and accepting with love, that itself will nullify the judgments. Okay. Then we have the last part. In another epistle, in this letter, in the same letter, the Alter Rebbe explains it in a little bit differently. He says as follows: the faithful, however, are not indisposed by any afflictions whatsoever, and with respect to all mundane matters, yes and no are all the same to them in a true equation. For the purpose of man's creation in this world is to test them by these trials, to ascertain what is in their heart, whether they will turn their hearts toward the other gods, namely the passions of the body, which evolve from the sitra achra, that means the negative side, and desire these, or whether desire and wish is to live the true life which evolves from the living God. By believing this truly, everything becomes good, even in a way we can readily see. So here, the Alter Rebbe gives a way that we could actually view it good now, if we realize that this is just a test, and this test is going to help us, that we can see it as good now. So, for example, the Rebbe spoke about this. He gave an example of that if somebody, he gave an example of somebody feels that they deserve honor, but they see that the honor is going to their friend, they're going to the guy next to him. And he says, I don't understand. How could it be? Why am I seeing this? What is going on? That my friend is being honored, and I deserve to be honored. And he knows that we're not talking about a person who's a bad person. We're talking about someone who is a pious person. But when he gets this very simple, if you will, a basic is probably the right word, test, he loses himself. And he starts to argue with God and says, how come this guy is getting honored and not me? So the truth is that every single Jew should be honored. Okay, so why are you in this situation? Why is he being honored and not you? It's because God is testing you. And we see this in regarding Job. He was a very righteous person. Nonetheless, he suffered. Why did he suffer? Because he had to be he was honored. He was challenged, he was tested to see if he's going to stay faithful. And through that he was able to so the question is, how, when a person is faced with this challenge, the question is, can he really say that didn't bother him, right? Can we really come to a point where he is in a place where he doesn't need to be tested anymore? Okay, we'll finish with one more story, and then we'll conclude. So this story actually is about the Rebbe's grandfather. His name was Rabbi Meir Shlomo Yanovsky, and there was some sort of epidemic in the town of Nikolaev where he lived. I think it was typhus. Some sort of epidemic like that was very common back then. Yeah, I think it was typhus. So they would quarantine everybody, and it's not like modern quarantines where you have cell phones and you can talk to people. Many of us experienced quarantine a few years ago in some way or another, but we're talking about totally isolated from human beings. And he had a colleague, a friend. His name was Usher Grossman. He was a very famous chassid, and I believe he was a shochet in the town. And every day he would come to the window of the hospital where the quarantine patients were, and he would stand outside and he would read the 11th chapter of Igeres HaKodesh from the Tanya. And the letter begins it gives a perspective on existence and suffering and how a person can remain joyful even in times of pain. Right, and how it's hidden good. So, it goes as follows: when a person contemplates deeply and imagines in his mind the creation of existence from nothing at every moment, how could he possibly think that anything is truly bad for him, whether in health, livelihood, or anything else? For the nothing, which is divine wisdom, is the source of all life, goodness, and pleasure. It only appears as evil because it cannot be perceived. In truth, no evil descends from above, and everything is good. It is only that it cannot be understood due to its greatness. And so Rabbi Usher Grossman would come and he would read this every single day that he was in quarantine. It was not a short time. I believe it was 30 consecutive days, and he would He would go there, he would recite the Tanya, the chapter Tanya, and he would leave. He didn't even know what happened. And later, Rabbi Meir Shlomo, who was a very well-respected rabbi, told him, "You should know, I owe you my life, because being in such a situation was so mentally difficult that when he heard these words of the Tanya every single day, he got his strength back, and he was able to recover." So we see you see a story where this actually was put into practice. And lastly, again, coming from Lag BaOmer, there's a story in the Zohar of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai when he was approached that there was no rain, and when they came to ask him to pray for rain, instead of praying for rain, he said a teaching on the psalm of Hine Ma Tov Manayim. How good is it when brothers sit together? And what the Rebbe explained, this idea, what can we learn from the story? He said that we see that Rabbi Shimon lived on a higher plane. Usually we have to pray, right? We have to engage with prayer, which is there's me and there's God, and I'm asking God. Rabbi Shimon, however, actually says in the Zohar, it doesn't say that they came. It says and they asked him. It says as soon as they came in, right away he said this prayer, and before they could even ask him to pray, he said this teaching, and rain came. So we see from here that actually, when we study the inner dimension of Torah, when we study Kabbalah and Chassidus and this inner part of the Torah, that actually we could reach this idea of, that we said before, that when Mashiach comes, we're going to see everything in a revealed way. Or we have to go through the challenges, and then we could see everything, and we could see how it brings out the best of us. And it could be something very deep. But through studying these special teachings of the Zohar, of Chassidus, of Tanya, of all these things that we study, we can actually get to this level now. In other words, it's not that, like we said before, we don't have to wait for Mashiach to come for us to understand it. We can understand it now. We can understand it in a real way. And just like the story where Rabbi Meir Shlomo, who was inspired and his reality changed, his health was increased because he understood that nothing evil comes from God, that itself is what brought about his salvation. Thank you very much for joining. If you have any questions, comments, you can leave a comment. If you like these classes, please like, share, etc. You could donate if you want to help us and sponsor a class. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much for joining, and God willing, we will see you next week.